So my next guest on today's show, I am so excited that he's giving us his time today. Let's say hello to the one and only Mr. Peter Freestone. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Well, I've got
a bit of a cough, so you'll have to excuse me every now and then. But other than that, I'm very good.
I've got to say, me along with millions of others, we've all got Queen fever since watching the fantastic Bohemian Rhapsody. But the film, personally, for me, kind of gave me a real insight of what an extraordinary man Freddie Mercury was. And I mean, you knew him better than most. You had a very close friendship with Freddie, but I'd love to go back to the very beginning on how you both actually met and, you know, became friends.
1979. See, we do go back a few years. I was working at the Royal Opera House for the Royal Ballet, for the running wardrobe, looking after the costumes for shows that were, you know, going on. You checked the costumes, made sure they were clean, that everything was right. You put them on the dancers in the evening. They go do their bit, come back, and you take them out of the costumes. The Royal Ballet put on a big charity gala. It was in October 79. And they wanted someone different, someone special as a guest star. And so they decided they wanted Freddie Mercury, who, as a surprise to them, actually gladly accepted. Because Freddie, you know Freddie in his shows, and even to the costumes he was wearing before 1979. I mean, he really considered himself a dancer, or able to dance, let's say. So, he jumped at the chance. He sang Crazy Little Thing Called Love. It was the first public performance of that song on the release. And he sang Bohemian Rhapsody. It was live vocals, backing track, but he was being perambulated around the stage by the Royal Ballet. I mean, there was about 12 dancers, and he was with them, dancing with them, being lifted up, thrown around. I spoke with him after the show, and I just said to him, I thought it was absolutely amazing. His voice, Queen music, and the Royal Ballet. It was just a perfect match. And I mean, he was really polite and said, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, I've seen you at the Opera House when I've come for rehearsals. What job do you do? And so I explained about looking after the costumes, and that was the end of the conversation. But about a week later, someone from Queen Management rang up my boss to ask if I would be available to do a 6-week tour with Queen, looking after the stage costumes. And that's how it all started. Those 5 minutes chat obviously had some effect.
That's just incredible. And I mean, you both clicked so well, but what I wanted to know is, how did you go from working in that capacity to actually then being his PA? Because Freddie must have thought a lot of you to want you to work so closely with him.
Well, the thing is, we clicked. It just worked. I put it down to us actually having very similar backgrounds. I mean, obviously, he was 9 years older than me, but he went to a boarding school in India. His was actually in northwest India. I went for 5 years to a boarding school in India, but mine was in the south of the country. But it's a very different upbringing in that you're not at home, you're not with your parents. You know your family is there, you know they love you, but you create special relationships with friends, because those are the people you actually see and talk to and rely on every day. And we had that similarity. So I understood why he didn't feel the need to call his mother every day.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And whereas other people who weren't familiar with that sort of background would say, don't you miss your mother? Don't you miss your family? Don't you, but in that situation, you don't. And there was no questioning about it. I just accepted it. I understood fully why. And we just really got on. He never wanted someone around him who was just constantly saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir.
Yeah.
He wanted me to actually say what I felt and what I, and talk to him, just literally talk with him. Because I did the costumes for the whole band for about a year. And then Freddie he decided he was going to do tax years away from Britain because he wanted to put some money in his pocket rather than the government's. And at that time, you have to think at the beginning of the 1980s, it was anything up to 90% went to the government. So he decided he wanted to put some of that in his pocket. So it meant not being in Britain for a year. You were allowed, I think, 14 days at the end of any 1 year. Or basically what you could do, you had to be out of the country for a month and you could be back in the country for 1 day. But the thing is, it wasn't such a hardship because Queen were non-stop touring, recording everything. So, we were out of the country most of the time anyway. But it meant that we were sort of joined at the hip for a few years. And the friendship just developed. It just grew naturally. And it's something that obviously I miss to this day. Although saying that, I have some amazing friends here where I am.
And in regards to, obviously, your friendship with Freddie, you would have seen the real Freddie, what he was like at home, what he used to like to do in his spare time. So we always got to see that eccentric, extravagant stage man. But what was he like at home? What did he like to do in his spare time?
On the stage, yes.
Yeah.
The person who had, and you see it in the film so wonderfully, the person who had the whole world in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
There was the total opposite side to Freddie. There were variations of Freddie as well. I'll explain. Freddie would get up. He would have to. There was always a cup of tea by the side of his bed at 9 o'clock in the morning. It didn't matter if he went to bed at 2 o'clock or if he went to bed at 6. The tea had to be there at 9 o'clock. He would then get up, put on the nearest things closest to him, so mismatching tracksuit didn't matter. And he would come downstairs and he would have his breakfast. Then he would maybe go and sit in the sitting room, or maybe go into the garden, play with the cats, or feed the carp. He had this pond with koi carp. And if you put the granules that you feed them, you put it in your hand. And if you put it by the water, the fish will actually come and eat out of your hand. And he loved doing that. He didn't have to talk. He just had to know that someone was within reach. But there were times where he loved just sitting out in the garden on his own. He would then maybe arrange for some friends to come over for lunch. And already he would then start putting on one of the Freddie suits, where he would become Freddie, the sort of the homeowner, where he would welcome his friends and guests to lunch and just make sure they enjoyed his home. He didn't put on, a totally false perspective or anything, but he put on layers that expanded him. At home, as I say, okay, if friends were coming over for lunch, he would put on a matching tracksuit. But if he went outside of the door, the front gate, he would be what the world expected, and he would have trainers, jeans, T-shirt, leather jacket, and sunglasses. He would be what people expected him to be. He was a chameleon like that. He could become what you needed, what you wanted. But above all else, he really was so shy. He could not walk into a room on his own. If there was people in the room, he just could not do it. You always hear about Freddie Mercury and his entourage. Basically, it was just a couple of friends. It didn't have to be the same people, but friends that he knew, who would then walk into that room with him, introduce him to the 10 people that are there, and he would become the life and soul of the party. But he could not go into the room on his own and introduce himself.
And why do you think that was? What was it about kind of having to go into the room alone that kind of he didn't like? Why did you think he needed to have those people to kind of introduce him?
Well, the thing is, the thing you have to always remember, that when Freddie was being introduced to someone, whether it was through work, through friends, whatever, the very, very first thought in his mind was, who do these people want to talk to? Freddie Mercury, the stage persona, or do they actually really want to know me? And so he would be very easily put off any situation that he had to actually really start thinking like that.
And I've got to go back to the film Bohemian Rhapsody. One of the kind of stories within the film that really touched me was the story of Mary Austin and Freddie, who was considered to be his true love. And Mary really seemed to understand Freddie and helped him to be himself. So what are your memories of Mary and Freddie? Because I guess you would have seen Mary quite often. You would have built your own relationship with her.
Yeah. No, I mean, she was there for him all the time. She had been there since 1969. They did actually share a flat. They lived together until 1975, when Freddie actually had enough money to buy a flat for himself and a flat for Mary. But that was literally 100 yards away. I mean, in the film, it's sort of shown in Garden Lodge, but where Freddie was actually able to see Mary's bathroom was in the first flat he had, which was in Stafford Terrace in London, and she lived in Fillmore Gardens. So it was literally, you could see from his upstairs sitting room, you could see to her. But the thing is, she was there all the time. She was, other than the accountant, and me included, other than Freddie's accountant, she was the only person who knew exactly what money was where it was being used, how it was being used, everything like that. I mean, she took care of all that side of Freddie's life. She was his sort of personal, private secretary.
And in the film, the thing that really got me was obviously the part where she knew something was not right for a long time, and when he came out that he was gay to her, she obviously at first it hit her, but she stood by him, she supported that, and to see that she moved on and she had partners afterwards, and Freddie had partners, and it almost seemed like such a family, and it was like they were married but not married, if that makes sense. It was kind of like,
I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. The thing is, you have to remember with the film that it is a Hollywood film. It is not a documentary.
Yeah.
But saying that, it is based on fact. And Freddie happily supported Mary's other relationships. He didn't want her to sit at home and become a Miss Havisham. He really wanted her to have some sort of a life. But the thing is, she was always there. You see, because of the relationship Freddie had with his parents, for example, because of their religion, which didn't sort of fit with his lifestyle, he never pushed it into their face. So whenever he did go and visit his parents, or on the very few occasions where his parents would come to Garden Lodge, Mary was always there. He always took Mary to his parents because they knew her. He spoke to them maybe once every 2 months, and she would speak to them once a week. Just to keep the family happy, to keep them informed, to let them know what was going on. The scene where Freddie comes out to Mary in the film is maybe a little bit fantasized, but it happened. It happened sort of as it, I mean, Mary said in an interview that she remembers when Freddie said, "I have something to tell you." And she says, "Yes, go on, tell me, go on, say it." And so Freddie was actually sort of dithering about it. And she said, "Freddie, I know you're gay." But that didn't change her feeling towards him.
And that's the kind of love that, it's just the strongest kind of love. The fact that through all of that, they remained these closest of friends. And like you said, I've tried to look at different interviews with Mary, but she's very private and very quiet. And you don't hear from her. I mean, when was the last time that you spoke to Mary?
Actually, it was, I think, 2003.
So a very long time ago.
Yeah. Because the thing is, she went through a marriage, and her husband, I mean, I wouldn't want to be him if you think that he has to compete with Freddie Mercury every day of his life, because they were living in Garden Lodge, and so he wanted her to have as little as possible to do with the whole Queen setup. So people sort of, the relationships sort of fell apart a bit.
And another part of the film, which I had no idea about until obviously I watched Bohemian Rhapsody, was of course the Paul Prenter story. In regards, in the film he was kind of portrayed as the villain. So do you know much about Paul? Do you remember him? And would you say the character that we see in the film was actually kind of real life?
Well, there were parts of real life within his character, but there was also part of real life of maybe two other people who did not appear in the film. So the Paul's character is in fact a mix of two or three people. Okay. Like I said earlier, the film follows the Hollywood formula. For a drama film, you have to have the sort of the light bits. You have to have the fun bits. You have to have the deep depression bits, and then you have to have the amazing climax. And so you have to make Queen's life story fit that formula. Believe me, when I watched the film, the first time I actually watched the film, I came away having seen part of my life on that screen. While things are not exactly as they were in reality, it is incredibly believable what you see on the screen. As I say, with Paul, you need a bad guy in a drama film. Paul, while he wasn't exactly as he is portrayed, and I think Alan Leach did an amazing job with Paul Prenter. As I say, that Paul Prenter is an amalgamation of two or three people who were not the best for Freddie.
And did you ever have a conversation with Freddie and kind of say, look, it might not be my place to say, however, I feel like you might be with the wrong crowd. Did you ever have those conversations, or was he kind of best left to, make that decision himself?
That was something for him.
Yeah.
The thing is, in his life, he knew when he made a mistake. But in his life, I think, other than partners, those you don't count, but of people who mattered to him, I think Freddie only made two mistakes. He was an incredibly good judge of character, except where love was concerned, of course. But then that's the same for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
When love enters the scene, forget what you should do and what you shouldn't do and all the rest. You just do what you do.
And another thing I really wanted to talk to you about, just because I found it quite difficult just to see. I've done loads of research because I went away watching the film. I was so inspired by the man that Freddie was. I spent ages just looking at different things that were involved in the film. And of course, the press hounding Freddie in regards to his sexuality. And you just wouldn't get that nowadays. And I just found it so, I can't imagine what he went through back then. Did Freddie ever confide in you about his sexuality? Was it known to the people closest to him before he actually made it public.
Yes, of course it was. You only have to watch an interview with Diana Mosley, who did his costumes for, which was his first solo video. Anyway, the first one, he wears this sort of military uniform thing, and it's got these mirrors and all that sort of stuff in it. And from then on, Freddie only had Diana do his costumes, whether it was for shows or for videos, and even for some of his suits and things at home. She said, that before she started working with him, someone, whether it was a director or a producer or what, someone said to him, but look, Freddie's gay, but, you just get along. He doesn't talk about it or anything. And she said, but the thing is, when I met him, there wasn't any, you didn't have to think, he just lived gay. When he was with people he knew, he just was himself. But saying that, he went out, this was in the early 80s, he was out every night of the week in bars and clubs, and yet there's no paparazzi shots of him because people didn't follow you around like they do today. Yeah. Also, he never had a press agent who would ring the press to say, oh, well, to get a good shot of Freddie, he's going to be in this shop at this time today. He never used the press like that. He did interviews and things when he needed to, when there was a new video, when there was a new tour, things like that. He did the interviews. But he never used the press. So up until the last 2-3 years, they really basically left him alone. As far as his sexuality is concerned, 2 times, to my knowledge, he was specifically confronted. One journalist said, I hear you're gay. And he says, I'm gay as a daffodil, dear. And next question? But nothing was printed. And then the second one was the journalist said to him, I hear you sleep with men. And Freddie just said, I sleep with men, I sleep with women, I sleep with my cats. What has that got to do with my music? And that one sort of comes across in the press conference scene in the film.
Definitely.
His sexuality has had absolutely nothing to do with his music.
And I know you had quite a big involvement in this film. You were asked to be at the studios, and you were involved with the director. But how come there wasn't a character about you in the film?
Well, if you've seen the film. Yeah. How many characters there are in the film, and they are all involved in the storyline. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. The thing is, yes, okay, if you're looking at the period of the film that I was with Freddie, which would have been 1979 to Live Aid, 6 years, 5-6 years. Yes, I was next to him physically all that time, but I wouldn't contribute to a storyline. They had to put 15 years into 2 hours and 10 minutes. So I would have just been an extra character in there, slowing the story down. For me, it doesn't make any difference. Because when I saw the film, I saw my involvement in the film.
Yeah.
The first thing that I noticed was, towards the beginning, when the whole band is together, and Freddie's parents and Mary's parents and everything, and someone says about Freddie, where he was born, and his mother says, oh, but he was born in Zanzibar. Didn't you know that? And so, no. And then Kashmira, Freddie's sister, says, well, if Freddie had his way, he'd be born in London, aged 18. That was a direct quote from an interview I did back in the 1990s. So for me, that's my character in the film. Those were my words. I spent time with the production design, with props, with wigs, with costumes, with everything for 6 weeks before the shooting started. And one of the questions from prop department was, when Freddie had his cup of tea in the morning, what was the make of the tea, the crockery? I said, well, he used to have this, it was a Japanese maker, Noritake. It was white porcelain with gold bands round the edge. And in the film, you see Freddie drinking his morning tea with this white porcelain cup with a gold band around it. That was me in the film.
So much detail.
Freddie, after the Live Aid section, there are a few still shots.
Yes. And
it says that Freddie was buried according to Zoroastrian faith. That was because of me. Because when Freddie died, I just thought the whole world has had Freddie Mercury for 20 years. His parents were going to have to do something that no parent should ever do, which is bury a child. So I felt it was only right that they were allowed to bury Farid Bulsara while the world saw the funeral of Freddie Mercury. And so I made the arrangements with them how they wanted things to be. So it was with the Zoroastrian priests and the service done to their wishes. So there again, it was me. So I don't need to be in the film. Yeah. Again, so many people find so many faults with the timeline, so many faults with this, and this in the film. When I watched the film, yes, of course I saw them, but they didn't matter to me because I was there in reality. So while I was watching the film and really enjoying the film and crying during the film, I had real life running through my head as well.
And I mean, going back to, because I've watched you say you were in kind of like a black tent with some of the other kind of, the big people that were making the film. And you would say that you would watch Rami Malek and his scenes, and he was just incredible. And for you to be so close to Freddie, when you watch his performance, what are your thoughts on that? Because he just channeled Freddie so well.
Yeah. No, I mean, Rami has done an absolutely amazing job. He worked so hard. He was on set almost every single day, and he would be there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, starting with the makeup and everything. And during the day, people might think that he was being a bit standoffish or something, but he wasn't, because he had to be Freddie Mercury for 8 hours a day. He just couldn't be Freddie Mercury for 10 minutes shooting, then be Rami Malek for half an hour, waiting for, changing the camera angles and everything, and then become Freddie Mercury again. He took this so seriously. And for me, like I think for anybody, any of the crew, the cast, producers, film companies, anybody, everybody, to see the news this morning that Bohemian Rhapsody is nominated for the best film in the Golden Globes and that Rami Malek is nominated for best actor. It's just how it should be.
And the film just moved me, and I'm sure that you would agree that Freddie would be so proud to have seen the film. But not only that, the reaction from the film and the fact that so many new fans have discovered Queen. The amount of times I'm on Facebook and people have said, I wasn't that too familiar with Queen, but my goodness, I've been downloading this album on Spotify, I've been listening to this, and they absolutely have just fallen in love again. And it's just such a nice thing to witness that a film has brought everyone together and the legacy of Freddie lives on.
As I said, I was doing this interview this morning, and when you think that a couple of weeks ago, where are we now? We're on the 7th. So 3 weeks ago, 27 years ago, Freddie Mercury died. Not only from the reaction from the film, which has been outstanding, but if you ask any Queen fans, I don't think any of them will actually say to you that Freddie ever went away. because of the music of Queen. You know, the whole band, all four of them, with the music they have written, it has never gone away. You can hear Queen being played on so many radio stations throughout the year, every year. You go to any sports event, you will always be hearing "We Are the Champions," "We Will Rock You." It is good music, and good music never goes away.
And touching upon the film again, we saw it was almost like that happy ending where Freddie finally found love with Jim. So again, did you have a good friendship with Jim yourself? And what can you tell us about Jim?
Oh yeah, I mean, I knew Jim long before Freddie did.
Oh wow!
Because before I worked at the Royal Opera House, we're going back many years now, back to 1973, 74, I used to work at Selfridges when it was a department store, not a conglomerate of stores under one roof. I mean, I was there in the days when there were 5,000 staff members for Selfridges. I was assistant manager of one of the restaurants, the youngest assistant manager that Selfridges had ever had, in that I was 19 years old. And Jim worked in Selfridges in bespoke wigs on the first floor. You know, where he was, people would go in and be measured and have a wig made specifically for them. And that's where he was at. And that's where I first met him in 1973 in Selfridges. He used to come down to the restaurant that I managed for his morning coffee.
And I mean, Jim.
So I'd known him for that time. Yeah, and we stayed in touch through till I think it was 2010 when he sadly died.
Because Jim was another person I was watching interviews with, and you could just see when he was talking about Freddie, the smile would light up on his face. It was like you can't talk about the legacy without just wanting to smile. And that was nice to see. And he seemed to get
Freddie. That's what Freddie created within people. If you were sitting around, I mean, Freddie was a great one for traditions. And one of them was that, you know, on Christmas Eve, he would have friends round to sing Christmas carols. But whenever people came and spent time with Freddie, we were smiling, we were laughing. Freddie was that sort of person. He loved laughing. For me, if there is one thing this is missing in the film, it's Freddie full out laughing, because that's the image of Freddie that I will always have in my mind. He loved laughing. You know, when you see him in interviews and things, he always uses his top lip to cover his teeth, and if he's smiling, and if he laughs, his hand goes up to cover his face. At home, he didn't care. I mean, he hated his teeth, but he wouldn't do anything about them because he was scared it would change the sound of his voice. But at home, he didn't have to care because it was only friends. And he could throw his head back and laugh and laugh and laugh. And that, for me, if there is one thing that I find missing in the film, that's it. That's all it is.
And I've got to talk about, obviously, one of the most difficult stages of your life, I would imagine, was the time leading up to Freddie's death, because you were someone he would confide in, you were one of his closest people around him, and he thought a lot of you. So, but I was watching loads of different interviews, and a lot of various people have said that leading up to his death, he kind of had more of wanting to make music. He was so determined to keep making music and keep making music. Was that something that you remember?
Oh, very much so. Really, from the time he told me he was sick, which was 6 weeks maybe after he knew his diagnosis, the only thing that really changed, other than he didn't go out every night, was his concentrating on music. You have to remember, he got this diagnosis just after he had agreed to do the Barcelona album. So he did the Barcelona album. That took him through to 1988. He then started work with Queen on the Miracle album. And as soon as the Miracle album was finished, he then started work with Queen on the Innuendo album. Freddie Mercury was all about music. That was the big love of his life. If there has to be a love of someone's life, music was the love of his life. It's what he was created for. It was what he loved creating. And that's all he really wanted to do once he knew. Because he said, I want no sympathy. I don't want anybody to sort of, oh, Freddie, you're tired. You can't do this. You mustn't. No, I have a life to live. I have less time than others have got, so there's a lot of things I need to put into this time. Nobody knew how long he had, whether it was 6 months, 6 years, nothing. The doctors did not have a clue. But he just set his mind to it, and that's what he did.
And in regards to the music, I can't personally watch Those Were the Days. I can't listen to that without crying, because I know it wasn't written for Freddie and in regards to his illness, but there's such a moment when you listen to that song where you can't help thinking about Freddie and the way he's singing it. There's just something in that song and his performance.
Yes, but also just the way he looked. That was the crowning factor. But as you say, it was written by Roger about when his children were young. But Freddie, just by putting at the very end that I love you, I still love you, he totally changed the whole song. But nobody was going to do anything about it, because it just was absolutely perfect. It gave him the chance to say goodbye to the fans and to say goodbye to some of his friends, because he never spoke to some of them after that. He'd stopped singing. He slowly sort of kept people away for the last year of his life, because he wanted them to remember him smiling and happy and not getting thinner and not being able to entertain them, not being able to look after them.
And were you one of those people that he kept away, or were you still there kind of looking after him?
No, I mean, I was there. I was there in the room at the end. For the last week, actually for the last 2 weeks of his life, he was never alone. There was always someone with him. Between Jim, Joe, and myself, we spent 24 hours a day with Freddie. And I remember my last night with Freddie was on the Friday, the 22nd. He had given the statement. It was actually released. I know everybody says it was released 24 hours before he died, but it was actually released 47 hours before he died. But, of course, because it was released at 8 o'clock in the evening, it missed, everybody got hold of it, but it was printed on the Saturday, of course.
Yeah.
And then he died on the Sunday. So, he had given that statement. So that night, he was the most relaxed I'd seen him in a long time. And he was lying in the bed. I was just sitting on the cover. TV was on, and I was just sitting there holding his hand, so that he could go to sleep, he could wake up, go to sleep, wake up, but know that someone was there with him. He wasn't alone. And we would talk when he was awake, and, then he would sleep, and then he'd wake up and talk. And I will always remember to my dying day, it was coming to about 8 o'clock in the morning, and so I said, look, I'm going to be going off soon. I hope you get some good rest today, that you feel a bit better. And the very last word he said was thank you. And to this day, I will never know if it was thank you for that night, just for being there for him, or if he had already decided that he didn't think he would see me again, because he just wanted it all to finish, all to close. And he had nothing to stay alive for then, because he'd made the statement. He'd cleared everything up in his mind. Or whether it was thank you for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I will never, ever, ever know. I will never. It's just the way it is. But, and then, of course, I was there with Jim when it actually happened.
Well, Peter, I've got to say, what I love is the fact that you do so well in keeping Freddie's memory alive, and you attend so many events, and I think it's so nice that people can hear from someone he was so close to, the real Freddie, what he was really like. And it's just so, for me, I mean, I'm only 25 years old, and I'm sitting here listening to you today, and I'm just in awe of just Freddie and your memories with him, and it's been an absolute honour just to get some time with you today. It really has.
No, I mean, for me, someone was going to write a book about Queen and Freddie, and he saw a rough draft, and he said, that can come out after I'm dead, because he didn't like the idea that it was only saying how wonderful Queen was and how many records they'd sold and how good everything was. He says, if when I'm gone, I'm not going to be here, it's not going to bother me, but people should know the truth. It's got to be truth, warts and all. And all I want to do is to give people the truth, because Freddie deserves that.
Yeah.
There are plenty of books out there that are full of rubbish. But saying that, that's what so many fans believe. And then they will move heaven and earth to stop someone trying to destroy their image of Freddie Mercury. All I do, I will go where I am invited. I will never ask to go somewhere. If they want me to be there, they can ask what questions they like. I will give them an answer, and I will give them the truth. This I do, in fact, with something else that I'm doing here. I mean, it's not only in Czech. We do it in Hong. We've done it in Hong, America. A young Czech guy and I have created a project. It's called the TFA project, Titanic Freddie Age, where we compare the Titanic and Freddie, how the Titanic was destroyed, this brand new unsinkable ship was destroyed by something you only see a little bit on top and the rest is invisible. And Freddie was destroyed by something you can't see with your eye. And we go around to schools. We talk to 13 to 18-year-olds about AIDS awareness, because that's the age groups that need to know about it. So, and part of this seminar, I mean, it's only an hour long because it has to fit into school times. Part of it, the last 15 minutes of it, is questions and answers. And it's amazing how these young people, they know about Freddie Mercury, and then they are asking serious questions. And for me, people have said to me, but don't you get sad having to think about these things and do, No, I've done my sadness time. If by talking about things like this, I can help someone. Milan and I have said that if we can save one life a year, even, because we've spoken to about 7,000 students over the years up till now, and we start again in the new year. If we can save one student a year, we've done something. And this, again, is Freddie's legacy. Freddie, while he isn't here, is helping protect the lives of young people. And not only young, he's there protecting the lives of anybody who's prepared to listen.
And like you said, I've been watching a lot of stuff that you do, and I just think it's incredible the work that you put in to raise awareness. But again, this film was just fantastic. From getting to see the reenactment of Live Aid, I never thought that could be recreated, but just to see that section in the film was just amazing. And you must have,
well,
I guess.
I mean, there's that little clip that Brian Singer has put onto social media where the film band are rehearsing Live Aid, and then this camera sort of pans over, and there's Roger Taylor, Brian May, myself, and Brian's daughter just looking in awe at how these guys are recreating Live Aid. I mean, there is a sort of little secret to it, but it's absolutely amazing. The movement coach, she had a monitor watching the filming, but she spent weeks with these guys creating that scene. But she had this monitor, and in the bottom right-hand corner of her monitor, she had Live Aid playing, so that she could tell each of the band members, no, your left hand has to be up a bit more. No, John, put your right leg over there, so that it is like you were saying about the detail of the cups and saucers and things. That is the sort of detail that went into recreating Live Aid.
I was watching an interview that you did, and it was in regards to Bohemian Rhapsody and the fact that the studio was laid out exactly like it was when they were recording that.
Yeah, because Brian May helped them with that and told them exactly what machines were in what position and all that sort of stuff. He also actually lent some of his own equipment for that Rock Farm scene. You know, some of the stuff that was actually in Rock Farm when Bohemian Rhapsody was being created was sitting in that set. You know, there were a couple of guitars that Brian used back in 1975 creating the song, and they were sitting on stands in that set. There was he had this tape thing. You know when Brian does a lick on the guitar and it repeats 2 or 3 times. He had the original machine that created that sound sitting in that set. Brian May was amazing doing this. He lent them guitars. Guitars on stage in Live Aid were actually guitars on stage in Live Aid, in the film and in the real thing. He lent them costumes so that Willem, who played Brian, could wear real Brian's costume. Not even and real clothes, normal outside clothes.
That's just amazing. That makes it just all a bit more real, doesn't it? The fact that, like you just said, it was the exact guitars, the exact costumes. You know, you are there. It is Live Aid all over again.
The funniest thing, someone actually asked me, where do you think Freddie's Live Aid costume would be stored now? Is it in Freddie's house, or is it in a warehouse somewhere, or is it? And I said, think about it. What costume did he wear? He was, other than the armband and the wrestling boots he was wearing, that was his outside clothes. And it just sort of struck me that someone actually thought that was a costume for Live Aid, but that it was his normal daytime wear.
It just jazzed up a little bit with the armband.
With the armband, and of course the thing is, any time he was on stage, he had to wear those wrestling boots because his feet had to feel comfortable, and he had to feel safe running around, and he did feel safe in those wrestling boots.
And you know, the thing that I loved the most was the fact that he was so flamboyant, and I loved the way he was almost, when you watch him, not arrogant in a negative way, but he knew he was good, and if he wanted something, he would get it.
Yes. I mean, he was up there saying, "Look at me."
And with a voice like that, I think, you know, you have the right to be like that as well. And he was so charming. And I know he was also very generous as well, generous to the people that he loved the most. And he was very generous to you after he died as well. And that must have touched you deeply, that he had left.
Oh, very much so. You know, very much so. But the thing is, people have asked me to describe Freddie in one word, which is totally, totally impossible. But to me, Freddie was the kindest, most generous, loyal friend anybody could ever wish to have. Because if you were a friend of Freddie's, he would do anything. And he prized loyalty and trust above everything.
And that's what makes him one of the most remarkable people. And I've got to say, Peter, thank you so much. I also want to apologise because originally I thought...
this was 10 minutes, wasn't it?
Yeah. Just talking to you and you're so. I could listen to you all day. You're so genuine with everything that you say, and hearing your friendship with Freddie has just been the most amazing thing for me to be part of, and I honestly cannot thank you enough for giving me your time today. Honestly.
No, it's been a pleasure. Because the thing is, I can always tell when someone is genuinely interested, or if someone is interviewing me. Yeah. And I have felt all genuine interest, believe me.
Thank you so much for giving me your time.
No, I mean, you thanked me, but it really has been a pleasure. It's been fun this last hour. I just this second looked at the clock. Well, one thing you must always remember, the only way I can make something sound really interesting is to be given interesting questions. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much.
You've made it easy for me. You've made it very easy for me.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Thank you.